Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second season of Cerberus at the Improv. I am Payman Ascari. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mr. Andre Milosh and Mr. Timothy Knight. We're starting the season with a very important topic, which is the financial aspects of Canada's ability to weather this storm. The budget was just released, so I'm going to jump right into it. We're going to go over the budget, the debt, and then the sort of the spiritual philosophical underpinnings of debt in a democratic society. I'm going to quickly go through and give a kind of a primer on what the budget is, and just bring everyone up to speed at the top of the hour. So the budget that was dropped, there's a $507 billion income. This is the money that's coming in. Just to simplify it, assume this is the tax base. This is how much they're taxing. They're bringing in $507 billion in taxes. They're spending, the expenses is how much they're spending on healthcare, services, education, roads, is $585 billion. So they're only bringing in $507 billion. They're projecting to spend, $585 billion, which is about $78 billion in excess of that. And they have a nice term for that. It's called the deficit. So when we're talking about the deficit, you take how much they're spending, 585, and you subtract how much they've brought in, 507. That's the $78 billion deficit. That's how much we're expected to go further into debt this fiscal year. Now, the debt itself is, for this year right now, it's about $2,300 billion. That's $2.3 trillion. What that debt represents, it's the accumulation of all previous reckless spending by our government. So our reckless spending this year is projected to be $78 billion. Last year, maybe it was $60 billion. The year before, $55 billion. All of these governments, these periods where we were spending recklessly, spending more than we were bringing in, adding all that together, we have $2.3 trillion in debt. Now that we're adding $78 billion to that, next year our debt will be $2.378 trillion. Now this debt, it's essentially, we went and we borrowed money. Maybe we borrowed it from the bank in the form of a loan. Maybe we sold bonds. Maybe we did some other complicated economic instrument. We employed it. But we're borrowing money, and these people, they're not lending that money to us out of the goodness of their heart. So we have to give them something back. That something is what's called interest. And the interest on the debt every year, for this year, for example, is $55 billion. So that's how much we have to pay on this debt that's accumulated because of reckless spending. Mr. Knight was kind enough to create this more user-friendly graph, because billions of dollars have no meaning. If you want to put it into perspective, what this means for the average family income, which is, $100,000 for a couple. So imagine your income is $100,000. You're spending $115,000. So that means you're spending $15,000 more than you're bringing in. You've been such reckless parents that you've actually racked up $460,000 worth of debt. And now that you're spending an extra $15,000 this year, that means next year your debt's going to be $475,000. This is the rough debt that Canada's had. You might not be able to see it clearly, but ever since this took off in 1974, remember that year. We might go over why that's important. This is a page that most Canadians might be familiar with, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. It shows our debt increasing second by second. It's about $30,000 per citizen now. It's growing 109 million a day. What is that? 4 million an hour. And finally, this concept of GDP, debt to GDP. Our debt to GDP is in excess of 100%. That's in my mind, that's insane. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Milosh. Go ahead, Andre.
Well, first of all, I want to make a very short statement. First of all, thanks to all our viewers. I put a background today with the puppy because there was no place to buy puppies in the Laurentian where I stay. I even called and wrote to the Canadian Legion who informed me that they would be available in many stores. So I made many stores. It was not the case. So, but puppies are available on Amazon. So what about buying Canadian? And I will still state that the Remembrance Day is what I could say shadow ban in Quebec, meaning that even if we want to celebrate this, even if politicians they wear puppies, I don't think that they care about people or they care about history or they care about veteran because they ignore them. So that's the statement, and I will remove the screen after because it's not very interesting live. That you said something payment about the GDP and the GDP, the debt, the GDP, the GDP for the debt, 108%. What you showed is one example of how we calculate the debt, but you could check, for example, Japan, and Japan is way past 200%, and yet Japan still works. But the problem is who owns the debt? Is it owned by people? You mentioned bond, or is it owned by a corporation, or is it owned by the bank? Let's not forget one thing: the bank they have a monopoly on credit. They create money out of thin air. So when they create money, let's say the central bank will print money, they will create inflation, and then you have to finance the services. Let's say you mentioned the the chart with the expense and the revenue. So we're spending more. We're spending more than what we are earning in taxes. So of course, one day we will hit the wall. And insolvency, I will hand it there. I will hand it to Tim after. Insolvency is something that is created by the people who lend you money. We can talk maybe later about the rating of the debt by all the notation like Fitch, Standard and Poor, and Moody's. Those are the three that we have in the Western world. So yes, I see your puppy clicking. So I will hand it there, and I will pass the microphone to Tim.
So Andre and Payman are going to go into the specifics of the debt itself, the budget itself, and what I've done is I've written 2 or 3. Well, I didn't write it. I used AI to help with the research, and posted 3 related articles on my Substack, which is the handle is you see in my tag below. In 2016, was it? Trudeau said the budget will balance itself. And today's or this week's budget, when we all crunch the numbers and others outside and beyond us also crunch the numbers and look at it honestly and filter out the ridiculous lexicon they're trying to jam down our throats, we realize that I project Canada to be insolvent by 2040. We're already over the cliff. So this show is going to say, this is why, this is what it means to you at a family level. And now we need to find solutions. So that's it for me for this point.
I see there's a lot of people here who have actually, we got 45 people watching. Squirrel Nuts, thank you for reposting the stream. Remanded, thank you for reposting the stream and carrying on with the fantastic work you're doing on the BC elections. Sundown 95, thank you. JT, thank you. I, like these numbers don't really mean anything. $80 billion is just it's incomprehensible to me as a person. And then I remind myself that it's not. This is just federal. It's not the provincial. It's not municipal. It's not household. It's not commercial. And they've further complicated things. Like if you go in there and you look at the line items, one of the expenses is the transfer. So they're transferring money from the federal government to the provincial governments. And it's very difficult to follow the paper trail. And when you try to call them out and say this is too much, they'll say, well, it's a transfer. It's not always an expense. They'll come back and they'll say it's not an expense, it's an investment. We're investing in our future. Meanwhile, people can see that everything is getting worse. I looked at social media today and I can sense that more so than in any year in my life, the average person is talking about debt. And this is just in the last 24 hours. They're talking about the debt. They're talking about fractional reserve banking. They're talking about things like insolvency. So I don't think this is something that's going to blow over. I think this is a very, very bad situation for Canada. Go ahead, Andre.
Well, like I mentioned before, toward the debt, and since 1972, since we abandoned the gold standard, all currencies are competing against each other. And the debt rating from those agencies, usually those agencies, they will reward countries that comply with the current monopoly, and they will punish those that want to escape this trap. I can refer to, for example, Greece in 2011, when they entered the European Union with the nice collaboration of Goldman Sachs, who falsified the books, so they could enter in the European Union. That was 14 years ago. And after that, Greece started to have problem financing its debt on the international market. Of course, the idea was to unite all countries in the European Union, but to bring them in a trap. And then after that, the rating of the debt was downgraded, and the International Monetary Fund wanted to grant a loan to the country, but they were imposing some, I would say, what they call haircut. You cut on social program, you cut on income. So you always arrive where there's a downgrade of the level of life of people. What we're seeing in Canada now, since 1972, it's exploding. It was already under Trudeau. You remember with the emergency measure in 2020, I think it was $400 billion, because the debt was about $600 billion. You arrive at a point where it's the international market that controls everything. And they create this system to enslave nation. You don't control your money, you don't control your debt, you're not sovereign. So I always say, since a couple of weeks or months now, that it's not because it's sustainable. It's immoral. It's immoral because you borrow purchasing power from the future and you spend it today. What happened in 5, 10, or 20 years? You will downgrade the income of people in the future to spend today. You can just take the example, and with the graph Tim mentioned, housing. Younger generation, they're starting to be very angry, not about the older generation, but about the idea of this system, because they will not be able to buy a house. They will not be able to have a family, and they will turn toward sterile entertainment. That's what we see with wokeism. There was a picture in the Time magazine with a young man and a young woman on the beach, and it's so nice without children. No children, no future. So we are already slave of this system. People are just not aware of it. And Tim said we will be insolvent. We are already insolvent, but it's like you go to the pawn shop You go see Shylock and you say, okay, can I borrow more? Okay, of course. But you're you're so not responsible managing your debt that we will have to charge you a higher interest. This is what is happening when the notation agency, they will downgrade the debt, the rating of the debt. It will be more difficult to finance. You mentioned $55 billion per year of interest, but this is increasing. It's compound interest, first of all. So I think it's very important that people understand there's no way out. There's no way out. The only way out is enslaving people toward this debt. And that's one thing that I've discovered. It's like your inheritance. You leave it to your children, and your children will leave it to their children. The burden or the inheritance of the people is the debt. This is a correlation that I discovered honestly by reading one book of Dr. Oliver A. Dorn, Social Credit Economic, and he's talking about the monopoly of credit.
Tim, go ahead. Taking notes.
Taking notes because it keeps me from interrupting. So, all right. So let me country. All right. So I want to talk about the IMF. You brought up IMF in Greece. The IMF is racketeering. Straight up, the IMF is racketeering. Canada has equivalent. We call it the Business Development Corporation. Same thing, right? I've done work with the Business Development Corporation. Got real close once. Went, no, I don't think so. To a point where you have these financial bodies, these financial instruments, right? IMF, BDC, and other similar organizations, not necessarily banking in particular, but they use the same instruments. IMF will go down into Africa because we saw what it did to Africa in the 80s. And it comes back with UNICEF and all the happy give to the children, but it was the financial instruments they were pushing into those countries to force them from third world to second world positioning economically in an effort to prevent Africa from being taken advantage of by China. So this is a Cold War on the Europe, North America versus economic China at that time. And having failed miserably, now these countries have gone to China and made private arrangements of the same nature. So how does this affect Canada? The IMF still needs money, right? The ANZAC nations, UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, are all under the crown. They're all under the same crown corporation. They're all under the same effective flag. They're all under the same model of democracy. They are the same. They're all the same colony. This still exists in that sense. This budget that we've seen this week, from what I've read and from what I've researched, is modeled on the UK budget, and in some senses extends on some of those elements. And the New Zealand and the Australian budget are the same methodology. The same methodology. They're using the same language. They're using the same comments. They're using the same idea of taking the brakes off the GDP as an anchor. This is the threshold. Taking the brakes off, acknowledging publicly that the GDP is in decline, and continuing to use it as a marker for their budget anyway. So an example is, let's say 1% of your GDP is used to create a guesstimation for how much money you're going to spend on national infrastructure, right? Like helping, hydro to upgrade their lines, or upgrade critical international standards and stuff like that, or do, Trans-Canada Highway, et cetera, et cetera. So they'll say 1% of the GDP is to do that. They know the GDP value is sliding. And like Payman said earlier, we're already borrowing 108% of the value of our gross output. So every dollar of product or service you put into your local economy from your store or your business or your hospital, wherever you work, every dollar actually costs you 8 cents. For every Canadian, regardless of who you are or where you are, that's your gross domestic product. So we have to go to the IMF and to other similar bodies, like Payman mentioned, selling bonds, etc., right? Other types of instruments, making handshake agreements with other nations that are kind of quasi barter, but money is the mode of transfer, right? The idea where Payman mentioned earlier, they say, oh, but it's not really an expense because it's an interprovincial transfer, except, well, then if it's an interprovincial transfer, why is it on the liability side of the balance sheet? Right? It's so what we want to do today is to help you to understand this is a gross number. I can't wrap my head around a billion, and we're at what, 2.3 trillion? That's 12 zeros. What am I going to do with 12 zeros? I can't wrap my head around three. So we're going to try to break it down to the family level. And my research basically says that if we were to break it down to one single family operating a budget in the same exact way, just scale it down, you'd all be insolvent in 15 years. No matter where you were economically, that because the scalability of it. So this is the kind of conversation we want to have today. When we get toward the end, when we talk about solutions, that'll be a different kind of conversation. But as far as the cliff of economic collapse using the budget as a marker is concerned, we are in cascade. We are in cascade, and it's intentional, and we need to find ways to, if at all possible, to correct it, and if not, to survive it.
It's accurate but bleak nonetheless. Thanks, Tim. So we're at 100 viewers. Last time I think we got to 750. If you could share the live stream, hopefully we can break that record. I wanted to go over
at least 78 billion viewers.
78 billion.
One viewer per.
A little bit above average. I wanted to go over like what debt means. I think Andre, you kind of mentioned this. You're stealing from future generations, and I looked at the voters in the last election, the elderly voters, the anger that they have, and the youth voters, the anger that they had, and the youth were saying, we can't afford a home. They don't know why they can't afford a home, but they just know that they can't. The elderly were saying, we want our health care. We paid into this. We want our pensions. We paid into this. And they didn't say it, but what they were saying is, this is my right, because when you fight for something all your life, it becomes a right. So the older generations, they fought for health care, and they, now that they're older and they need it and it's not available, they don't know why it's not available. But my inclination is that they purchased that welfare using the future generation's wealth. So when they were young, they could afford to have those services. And then that, in couple with the fact of the fiat reserve, the fiat banking system, fractional reserve, just paying interest, being siphoned off out of the country, we're now at a point where the tab has come due. The youth are expected to pay for this. They can't even afford a home. And they're at an impasse where the elderly are refusing to give up what they view as their rights to healthcare, and they're demanding that the youth pay for it. So we're talking at a high level, and I'll hand it over to you, Andre. But at the ground level, you also have these people that don't understand the way you and Tim understand it, but they feel it, and they're responding emotionally.
Of course, you're right. They feel it because one thing that I've discovered in the book of Oliver Adorn, it's based on the social credit system of Clifford Hugh Douglas, who was an engineer, British engineer. The income is never high enough to manage or to equal the production. Canada is a rich country. $1.3 trillion of debt is nothing because we have the resources. If we would produce, we could produce enough to supply goods and services to people, but they need purchasing power. So when you see the financial system emitting or destroying money, and they create inflation or they create deflation, and it's always at their benefit. It's never for the benefit of the people. When we see this type of behavior, we ask ourselves, are we in a free market? Monopoly is not a free market. I gave another example. Hydro-Quebec has a monopoly in Quebec. The idea in 1963 was to nationalize private company, to have tariff that would be equal everywhere on the territory of Quebec, which is quite okay because you say electricity is a commodity, it's a utility. You need it in a Nordic country, so you need energy. You're freezing when it is minus 25, so you have to heat your house, you have to light your house. That's part of essential services. But since 2000, they switched the definition of electricity to a commodity. And then they started to pressure the Quebecers, for example, to start to save energy, but they were exporting this energy in New England, in New York, in Ontario, in New Brunswick, in Nova Scotia, under the cost price. So they were shifting the money instead of trying to offer the electricity at the lowest rate possible. They were shifting the money and financialization, making the economy or the electricity commodity a finance commodity. That's what I mean by a monopoly of monopoly of banks. They control the economic system, they control the financial system, and they decide if you will be rewarded or punished. The rating agency, they act the same way. 108% of the GDP, like Tim mentioned, the gross domestic product, it costs you 8 cents per dollar. In 2014, in United States, it was $5 of borrow for $1 of growth. This was not sustainable. And you say, oh, it's the monarchy, it's the crown. How come the United States are in the same position? I can talk a little bit about Russia. Russia, the national debt is $200 billion in US dollar, for a population of 145 million. So it's about $3,000 per citizen. But they still have a central bank that is not controlled by the government, because the idea is always the same thing. The government cannot control the central bank. The central bank has to be independent because their mandate is to control inflation. No, their mandate is to control their monopoly. And we have to break this cartel. Same thing in the United States with the Federal Reserve. Everywhere where you have an independent central bank, it's a pyramid, it's a Ponzi scheme. They control the economy and they decide if you will have growth. We can talk about growth later, or you will have a recession. This is very important for people to understand. When you don't have enough money, like Tim mentioned, $100,000, and you spend 120, you will push back this debt to your children. That's not responsible. And what they did with the budget, it's what they do since 1972, because most of the time it was the Liberal who were in power, and they were increasing the debt every time. The Conservative were coming back in power. They were trying to balance the budget. They were succeeding in balancing the budget. I would say Harper was doing a good job, quote unquote, but still he did not tackle the essence of the origin of the problem. We should not be in debt because Canada is a very rich country. We have enough resource to supply goods and services to everybody. It's just because somebody's controlling it.
Go ahead, Tim.
I want to break into story time because when I rant, it gets a little bit ridiculous. So I'll just go into story time instead. Let's jump back to Egypt, and in a story, and I'm not going to question the reality or not reality of it, but let's go back to Egypt in the time of Joseph and the kings and the pharaohs. We talk about a period when there was a great famine, and these citizens were able to, because the country had prepared well for the famine, the citizens could go to the government, so we're talking about trade of a sort, and spend money to purchase grain. When they ran out of money, they were selling cattle, which is actually the means to their livelihood, selling that to the government. And when they ran out of that, they're selling personal and familial assets, so property, land, until eventually the entire country is sold over to the government. So in a negative GDP scenario, like a famine, all that you had saved, your assets, your property, that which you outright owned, you were trading probably at a reducing value, right? Or limited value. What do they call it? An accounting value to the government for your dose of grain for that period of time. At the end of that process, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt unified. And so I want to take all that today, and I'll take all of these ideas, push them into the modern economic model and our modern how we approach capitalism and our relationship with the government. Treat it now like a command economy where you have to go to the government to buy everything. They supply everything because that's the same scenario. And now ask yourself, what's the end goal? Well, look at Upper and Lower Egypt. The end goal is a super state. The end goal is a super state. When you crush into insolvency, the benefactor in all of your relationships, all of your contracts, all of your agreements, lays claim to your land, period. The UN is part of this with UNDRIP and UNDRIPA and all these other things on the side are quasi-distracting because the truth of the matter is when the country runs out of money, the UN, in the name of the IMF is one of the UN's dogs, will lay claim, and with the agreement and cooperation of crown corporations and whatever's left of the monarchy, all the Anzac nations will fall under. So you are looking at a super state. The only question is it a super state in our lifetime, 2040, 2050? And we know that they're talking about 2050 already. There is a 2050 agenda. So what's the result? Are we looking at Canada and Europe as a super state? Or are we looking at Canada and the United States and Mexico as a super state? And then, of course, where does Australia and New Zealand, fall into that mix? But what's happening across all of the Anzac nations, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, is the same language, the same methodology, the same approach, the same rationale. All the traditional British colony nations are, in my opinion, being converted back to a colonizer state where we become, once again, hewers of wood and drawers of water. That's what's happening.
It's funny you mentioned Egypt, because Egypt is basically in a debt trap right now because of the IMF. So they're screwed even up to today. A reminder for the audience: we really like to hear what you guys are thinking. So if you have any questions, put them down there, and I'll star them, and we'll get to them near the end. I wanted to kind of skip ahead. So we're talking about the debt now. I guess now I want to move towards the universal suffrage, the spiritual philosophical component. And I look at we use the word democracy. So anytime something goes wrong, like somebody burns a piece of toast, they say this is violating our democratic way of life, or, we live in a democracy. But here in Canada, it's a constitutional monarchy. I'm reading this book. It's called the Great Red Dragon, and in here it talks about how England they managed to take over the United States and buy up all their assets. And they cited this law. They said in England you have some law where the land gets passed to your oldest son, and it makes it harder for the City of London to come in and snatch up all the assets. So a constitutional monarchy, or a monarchy in a way, is a way to defend oneself from outside forces coming in. In China, they have this system where if a corporation gets bigger than the Communist Party, the Communist Party has to either take it over or gain some shares. In Russia, Andre, you know this better, but there is almost a continuity of government. Like you have, people say it's authoritarian, maybe it is, but you have Putin there the whole time. You have Lavrov, you have all these other people. You have the KGB that's working in the interest of the sovereignty of the nation. What I'm trying to get at is, it doesn't matter what form of government you have. Like Iran is a theocracy. Here we're considered a democracy. If you can't fight back against these banks that have centralized so much power, they have access to so many assets, it doesn't matter. You can't vote your way out of this, is what I'm saying. Like it's the people that control the money that are the ones that are actually running life, not the people that are elected into office. What do you think, Andre?
Well, like you mentioned, and certainly not the elected people, the House of Commons or parliaments of countries. I would like you to bring the quote of that I took from one of my essay, and after that, I will ask you to display one comment that I would like to discuss about. You see, democracy, the political regime in which the people have sovereign power, does not exist. For the people are also a fantasy or a mental construct in which individual, including the most enlightened minds, like many intelligent people, are imprisoned. We are imprisoned in a way, in a mousetrap. The secular matrix has well formatted past generation in order to condition them to democratic servitude. I use the expression, I think it is important. Thus, it is claimed that the individual must see the sovereign power and his right to violence to representative who will orchestrate the reality, but nothing was ever real. No individual, including the sovereign himself, the king, we can talk about it later, is able to ensure his sovereignty in a Western democracy simply because the mastermind, the invisible oligarchy that we mentioned earlier, has organized societies in such a way as to allow for permanent and intergenerational enslavement, the debt. We carry the internal burden from generation to generation of a public debt that will never be repaid, not because the member of any society are incapable of paying it, but rather because public debt is the keystone of democracy. This is why the master of the world, with the help of their armed wings, the nation state, always seek to bring democracy to people they consider primitive. End quote. Let's think about 1945 and what happened since then in the world. And after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Soviet Union, it was supposed to be peace on earth. People would be able to live and flourish. It did not happen. And every time we ask economics, even the last laureate of the bank, the of the Bank of Sweden in honor of Alfred Nobel, because there's no such thing as the Nobel Prize of Economy. Every time you ask all those economists, you say your system does not work. We have proof. We have fact. No, it's because we don't have enough growth. It's because we don't have full employment. It's always because we don't have something that we already have. We are rich. We don't need growth. Growth, it is a false narrative. We grow when you're a baby. You grow, you become productive, and then at the end of your life, you die and you leave something to your children. If you would have a society that is sustainable with a good birth rate replacement, it's 2.4 children per family, for example. You have a normal society. You don't need growth. You need replacement. I give you just an example, and I will end on that. In Ukraine, all the electrical infrastructure were built in Soviet Union. At the time of the collapse of Soviet Union, and when Ukraine proclaimed its independence in 1992, there was 54 million people on the territory. Now you're at 19 million. No investment in 35 years were made in the electrical grid or in the power plant. Nothing, zero. But it's normal when your population is reduced. Why you would do investment? So you arrive at a point, if you have a sustainable system, and not like the climate change activists, a sustainable system would be you produce good and services enough to supply and all the people so they can flourish, they can develop themselves, they can have a family, they can have children, they can have businesses, they can make profit. But they also are not, they don't have this Damocles sword over their head all the time. I will lose my job. I'm not performant enough. My credit is not good. It's always this. People are always in an anguish to react to a system that creates scarcity. That is the most important thing. They create scarcity, and then when you have scarcity, you will have competition between economic actors. If you bring the comment, I think it was a very important two comment. There was one comment from People United 3605. He said, we thought the 1920s was bad. They created that crisis in 1920. It did not arrive randomly. That's important. So they are creating it now for a purpose. The other comment is very important too. He said, why are we paying taxes on printed money? He's right. He's right. This money is created by the bank, and after that you use it, and you have to pay tax on this virtual money, because the money is supposed to help you exchange goods. So he's right. We are in a debt trap all the time, and we have to get out of it. And I think no politicians want to talk about this, because they are part of it. They are rewarded because they contribute to the monopoly of credit. I will hand it there.
A good point, Tim. Do you want me to keep up any of these comments, or you want to move on?
I do. I want to just add on, taking some notes here. Debt is the cheese, right? So we wonder why we're motivated. Well, it's not because I want the new Ford, right? It's not because I want to do an addition to my home. It's not because I want the vacation. Debt is the cheese, because we're all trying to avoid debt, and we're trying to manipulate and manage and juggle debt. Debt is the cheese. So when we ask ourselves why we're dropping in GDP, that's intentional to create more debt. We are always chasing. I'm convinced the end result of this experiment, since 2015 at least, is superstates. I'm convinced. When I see that this happening all across the Anzac nations, it's the UK is over on one side of the Atlantic. Here we are in the middle of two oceans, and there we are Australia and New Zealand on the opposite side of the planet. We're all experiencing the same thing. We're all the same culture. We're all the same root. We're all the same trade goods. We're all the same technology, relatively the same resources and capacities, shared history, shared genetics, the entire model. That's us. That's us. And we're all going into the tank at the same rate at the same time. This is intentional. This is intentional. So answering the question, why are we paying taxes on printed money? Well, not the question, the response. Tax revolt. That's the response. That's the response. The turn off the tap, right? I mean, I've been playing with a proposal on how to manage mass immigration by controlling the amount of money that you and I spend for post-secondary education for temporary foreign students and other similar models like that. You can't call me racist if I'm being fiscally responsible, because that's really what it's about. Right? All the other stuff, all the cultural conflict, that's just distraction. What they're doing underneath, they're not selling us out. They're not selling us out. All we've got left is our service economy. They prevented us from pulling the blood of the earth and using oil. They prevented us from pulling out the bones of our own earth, which is our mines and our right. They prevented us from farming it and from fishing in it. They prevent us from this what the second largest landmass on the planet, and we can't even manage it. We can't harvest it. We can't produce it. We can't manufacture it, and they won't let us sell it unless it's to the States or to frickin' Europe. This is intentional. We are being converted back to hewers of wood and drawers of water, which is the pre-BNA Act condition, where Britain in particular, but Europe also, wanted North America. And so this is where the early Americans, when we go back to Charles Fichtner's episode where we saw the 13 colonies, and how after Napoleon was conquered, Britain took the French section, which is on the just in this vertical section, in an attempt to cut off American expansion and to retain all of that under the British crown, because the Americans had cottoned on quickly. We need to be self-reliant. We need to be educated. We need to be use our creative talent and use our land effectively. And they had done that. Britain saying, we're taking all of this land. We must defeat Napoleon because we want that land, because we want North America. And they have it. They made us into hewers of wood and drawers of water, and we have been loyal to the crown, to the sovereign, because we believed in what they told us. I grew up believing in that flag right there. I still believe in what it stands for, but its original esprit de corps, its heart, has been stolen from us. And they continue to wave it around, elbows up, and all this other nonsense in an effort to get us to swallow their load and believe that this is an austerity budget and that we're doing all the right things. And it's not. And in my opinion, we are long past the point of properly standing up, MLAs, MPs, mayors, you name it, and saying, I've had enough. You go to your union heads and say, I've had enough. I've had enough. We got people out in Richmond who are at a very real risk of losing their actual home over stupid undripped garbage. And people groups are being used as the wedge against each other, and it's not them. We are all being forced into this conflict where, worse comes to worse, and the man next door comes to my family to take my food to feed his family. One of us is being carried away in a box, and the government is doing that to us on purpose. And this budget makes it very, very clear, especially when you see that it's doing it to our brothers and sisters across other nations. And Canada is already over the edge. We're already in free fall. By the time the debt payment is half of our total debt load, we will have nothing, and we will be grateful, not happy, grateful to have someone else carry the load for us. So when the time comes, we will beg them to save us from ourselves, and we will, like good Gulag residents, blame our own selves for the crisis.
Very well put, Tim. And I agree with your argument that they're intentionally trying to indebt us. They want us to be debt slaves. And I want to give my version of how I see they're doing that. Just for the audience, usually in the last half hour, we get to the questions and I'm starring them. So if you have any, put them in there. I'll index them and then we'll get to them shortly. There was a James Bond movie, one of the ones, it wasn't the last one, it wasn't Casino Royale, but one of the ones they recently created where there's this round table and one guy, John Batista, he comes in, he just kills one of the guys and he gets a seat at the table. So this concept of seat at the table, I think there's a movement that's running the world, in the West anyway. And let's just call it BlackRock, right? So BlackRock owns all the assets in the world. You call it central banks, whatever. And people can buy their way in. I sense that the Gulf countries are doing this. I think they tried to take out China, it didn't work. And I think China can do it. They're rich enough to buy. Like you buy a seat at the table. In reality, you're buying shares. You go to the US, say, let's stop fighting together. We have $6 trillion. We want X percent of BlackRock. And this is the way that they're controlling the world. Like these people, these institutions, these massive supranational corporations and fund management companies, they're the ones that are making all the decisions, and they want us in debt. And like, I guess it goes back to what I said. Like debt is basically, it's definitely unethical. I think it's immoral. It should be illegal. Like I don't think you get the sovereign debt. If I'm an addict, and if I get money from a loan shark, that shouldn't be able to be transferred to my children, but it is. And that's the mechanism, in my opinion, they're using to control us. Go ahead, Andre.
Tim mentioned something very important, and I will just make sure that everybody understands. First of all, I'm not an economist. I'm a writer. And I can say that in the 1999, 2000, I was a business trader at Hydro-Quebec, but I was starting to suspect an era of deflation. Deflation means the price of good will drop next week, so why I should buy it now? And there was a comment about the 1920s. It was better in the 1920s. I was suspecting this, but I could not name it. Now I know it. Maybe the word was not good. It was not deflation. It was negative growth. The economists, they like to invent something. Negative growth. It is deflation, but they like it. In 2011, 3 years after the financial crisis of 2008, the subprime crisis, they were talking about the negative growth because of the double dip. And the negative growth is, look at what you have around you, all the goods, the services, and try to picture yourself with 70% of less. The lamp, what you have in the back, the flag, Tim, that you have, the temperature that in your flat or in your house, 70% less of what you have. Think about natural resources, oil and gas, all the plastic that we use, the petrochemistry that is used to produce plastic. How could hospital could work without, or surgery could work, because we're surrounded by oil derivative product. Imagine 70% less of what you have. I say 70, it can be 80, it can be 60, but you say, wait a second, I will not have the same quality of life. Many immigrants in Quebec now, the second and third generation, our generation is 20 years. So people who are here since 20, 40, or 60 years, especially 60 years, they're starting to be around 75, 80 years old. They have children and grandchildren. They came in Canada. They came to Canada because they were expecting their children to have a better life. That was always the answer that I was receiving from immigrants. They were saying, we came to Canada because we expect that our children will have a better life. They came from ex-Soviet Union republic. They came from countries that were under a dictatorship, and they arrived here. And now they're saying, we're not sure anymore that our children will have a better life. And look at the young generation. They're starting to be very angry about the actual political system. And the actual political system is a vassal of this oligarchy that you mentioned, payment. Those great corporations. Now you just look in Ukraine, the CEO of Ukraine Energy, he said he made a statement, because now Russia is bombing all the electrical grid. He said, we will have to get used to have 14 degrees in our flat. Usually in Russia, it is 27. Under that, you're freezing. This is incredible. And now he's saying to Ukrainian, you will have to get used to the standard of Europe, which is 14 in winter. Imagine that you lower your thermostat, or you don't eat because you don't have any money. The price of energy has skyrocketed in Europe, and now Ukraine will be hit by the same. They wanted to be part of the European Union. Welcome to the club. So the deflation mode, or the fact that we would lose 70% of our quality of life, will touch directly the next generation. When you're 20, did you dream of going to study? You go to college, you go to university, or some people they have technical education. They want to buy a house. They want to create a family. Now, all the future is blocked because of this monopoly of credit. Because we have the wealth. We have it in Canada. We break it tomorrow. We break this cartel, and we can reestablish a fair system in 5 years. We can do it, but you have to remove a lot of corruption and a lot of, I would say, propaganda. This is quite difficult in this era.
Yeah, no, I agree. Tim, it's I'll let you speak, but if I have your graph queued up, if you still want to bring it up and talk to it, just let me know.
Yeah, let's do the graph the first graph you brought up earlier. Do that first.
Sure, just bear with me.
Yeah.
Not
that's
this
the
one.
second one. Yep. So this is the first graph we put together when was making an effort to bring down billions down into thousands, into something that we can actually wrap our heads around. So very quickly, if you're making 100,000 a year with your family, but you're expending 15% more family expenses in the yellow bar, and your total debt, as you see here, with the additional, and then in 2026 next year, you're also carrying over that additional 15,000 that you spent this year. That's kind of a snapshot of showing you what happens immediately in the Canadian federal budget. Is that the 15,000 every household is spending additionally this year is carried into next year without any appreciable overall reduction in your total debt load. It doesn't look terribly bad because it's only 15. Bring up the next slide. So this slide is all in the appropriate death and dark colors because it shows the actual cascade effect between the debt load added this year all the way to 2030. And these numbers are extrapolated from the Canadian budget. And yes, I use AI to do the economic math because I'm not a mathematician. I can think words. I'm not really especially good with numbers all the time. But these numbers will translate well, although they are extrapolations. What this shows is, in spite of decreasing new debt, which is what he said he's going to do, decreasing new debt each year, they are still adding debt. And because interest is a percentage of the total principal, and you're adding new principal, the interest, which is the yellow bars, continues to rise. The interest goes from a point where it's lower than the newly added debt to a point where it's higher than the newly added debt. And that's in a 5-year period. By my calculations and AI checking it over for me, not that AI is 100%, but it's better than me, Canada will be insolvent. And by that, I mean 50% of its total debt will be interest. So you're insolvent because it's impossible. If I get 50% interest on my car, I surrender the car. You surrender the car, right? So to whomever we owe our debt, be it bonds or IMF or other trade relations, or switching brides during tribal agreements. So however we do it, when we get to 50%, which is 15 years from today, Canada will absolutely, not just like the Egyptians, their money, their chattel, then their assets, then their land. At that point, Canada will be completely surrendered to whoever it owes. And it won't be on paper, it will be physical. And so that, to me, this is how this in a shorter version, this is what they did to Greece. In a shorter version, this is what they did to Greece. And it didn't happen to Greece until after they said, hey, can we be part of the European Union too? And Europeans said, no, you've been a bad boy economically. We can't take you on. But if you go under the mentorship of the IMF, they'll give you a good transition model that will help you to do this. And they went, well, okay, fine. If we got to, then we got to. So they go, and the IMF completely dry humped them into near oblivion. Well, no, the country went bankrupt. It did. Greece went bankrupt. Go figure. Right? One of the greatest, mightiest, longest lasting democracies, civilizations, 2,500 years old, went bankrupt after the IMF touched it. And then by that time, they were so desperate, but going to the EU, they said, we will do whatever we need to do to retain our nation. And that's when the EU said, Now we got you by the. Now we got you. Now we got you. That's going to happen. Is in process of happening to Canada and Canadians. If you lived your own home budget in this fashion, in 15 years, they would take your house and they will take your car and they will, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you won't have a choice. There will be no legal largesse. There will be no recourse. Nothing. There will be nothing. So I see a solution, which is tax revolt. That's one. You have to turn off the tap. You have to turn off the tap. And two is a big private entrepreneurship in resource development, because it can be done. It's just that it has to be done with private money. And the third is, if we're moving inevitably toward a super state and it cannot be stopped, the solution to that is tribalism, regionalism, because a super state cannot survive for long. And when all of these sub states, all the little Canadas, as a result of this super state, all independently collapsing, and they're all geographically a little bit different, and all ethnically a little bit different, and all their resources are a little. Look at Canada, right? You've got the Montreal corridor, you got the Toronto-Windsor corridor, then you have to go all the way to the Edmonton-Calgary corridor, and then out here in BC, the Fraser Valley to Victoria corridor. Those are the major populations, but all the resources is everywhere else, right? All the forestry, all the fishery, all the agriculture, all the mining, all the oil, all the precious and semi-precious stones. That's all out there, and so anybody who can get out there and work on that, develop that, that's where you're going to find your saving grace. Right. The next thing that we talk about will be universal suffrage. How do you get out of universal suffrage? You stop taking the government's money. That's where we have to go. If we want to survive when we all come down to the end of the waterfall, when you're not on the government teat, you will survive.
I totally forgot about the third topic. I was excited about going to the questions. I kind of struggle with this too, because on the one hand, in a democracy, you get the leaders you deserve. On the other hand, as I've mentioned, it's not a democracy. It doesn't matter what kind of government you have if you're under the thumb of the bankers. But so I'm not going to speak to that too much, Andre. I'm going to yield my time. I'll throw it over to you if you have anything you want to add to the suffrage portion.
Well, okay. You say if we don't live under a democracy, I will remove the if. That's an opinion, but I can bring fact. Why I refer to the economists when we're asking them why it is not working, and they're always arriving with a reason, but it's never rational. We do not choose our leader. We do not choose our representative. They are selected there. And when we look at how they behave, they benefit from this system. So they will never propose another way of another type of system or economic system, because that would endanger their privileges. They have privileges. They don't have rights. This system can punish them very easily. Tim mentioned something very important. Why did they attack Greece in 2011? That was a symbol. You attack a system that is very old, not necessarily the modern Greece, but the idea of democracy that was in ancient Greece was through for cities, city-states with owners. Slave did not have the right to vote. I'm sorry, women did not have the right to vote. It was owner who had the right to vote. People who were responsible financially who had the right to vote. And that was the core structure of the ancient democracy. They attacked Greece. It's not a random attack. They attacked Greece because it was a symbol. If you bring down the symbol of what should be a real democracy, you will be able to attack all the weaker countries. After that, it was what? Lebanon, Lebanon was a very good example. And then after that, they attacked other countries. They attack Ukraine, but they always attack weak countries. I thought I was wrong. I thought Canada was a strong country, politically speaking. It is not, because Tim mentioned it. We are under this structure, crown structure. We are colonies. We thought that by recovering the Constitution in 1982 and having the Bill of Rights, we thought that we were sovereign. We were not, and now we're discovering that the master is not the crown. The master, it is this financial structure that decides for us what is good and what is not. Tim mentioned something about houses and car. You buy a car, you go buy a car, you have a loan for, and you can pay back on 5 years or 7 years. But if you sell your used car, and you go to a dealers, and the dealer says, "Okay, I will buy back your car, and we will refinance your loan." Wow, you're refinancing a loan already, so you pay interest on interest. That's what we call compound interest, and up to it is so strange, because up to a certain point in United States, the used car market and the debt of student were so big that Biden had to impose a pardon, presidential pardon to the debt, because they were threatening the financial system up to a certain point. One day, the monopoly is so big that all the assets are concentrated in a few hands, and all the rest of the people, like Tim mentioned, are slave. We own nothing, and we're not happy. They think that we're happy, but we're not. It will lead us maybe to the next topic we want to talk about. What's the representative that we have, and what type of leverage that we have? Are we able to change this system with the actual election mode? I doubt it. I doubt it for many reasons. Again, what was the turnout last election, federal election? 60%. So 40% of the people don't dare voting. I think there was a comment from People Unite. He said, "I don't vote since 2016." People, they just give up. They give up. They say, "Okay, you won. I will not participate anymore." They have this passive resistance, but they will not participate anymore. They will not go and vote. They will still pay their tax, but they don't believe in this system anymore. So we cannot accuse them of not being responsible. Many of them, they're just disengaged completely. Maybe we have to think about how we could re-inspire them. That's a very, very important question.
Tim, if you can just speak to this as well, and then maybe we can get to some of the questions. We could continue touching on the suffrage issue through the questions, but go ahead.
Sure. Just expanding on my idea of entrepreneurship and breaking away from the problem of universal suffrage. Universal suffrage is fine when your benefactor is beneficent, right? So it's the beauty of a dictatorship is, as long as the dictator is alive and he's of a good nature, things are going to be pretty good. But chances are his son is a dick, right? Or someone's going to successfully overthrow him, and then things are going to get bad. So the problem with this on such a large scale, right? For example, socialism will absolutely fail because eventually the pigs move into the farmer's house. There's no way around that. And we're watching that now. We're watching that now where, like to say, the government of Ukraine is saying, well, I'm afraid you're going to have to get used to 15-degree winters inside your house, right? We've got Carney saying we're going to have to be prepared for some austerity measures, and he's throwing around austerity as if we all remember 1941, right? So there's a line in scripture where they say our fathers inherited lies. So we have to recognize that what we have inherited is a lie. and therefore not hate our fathers because they inherited it too. And so we need to wake up and say, this is where we are. No, it is not good. We need solutions. And in a post nation state, and if that means that that's what they really believe up there, then none of their institutions have any interest in resolving the problems and issues that we were once felt as members of a nation. They're not just simply saying that we're in a post nation state. They're saying we are also acting as if this is a post nation state. And the key word is state. So our solution is literally regionalism, tribalism, and a family based approach, which are concepts that we have been saying here on the show for more than a year now. And that is, you strengthen your family. You get your kids educated in a trade or a craft or something they work with their hands or with their mind that they can contribute to their community and their local. We have to begin to think locally, and I'm not talking made in Canada nonsense. I'm talking think locally. Think locally. If you have a family member who is remotely good at sewing or tailoring, then you help them become really good at it. If you have a family member who's remotely interested in carpentry or mathematics, you help them be good at that, because the time will come you're going to rely on that. You're going to need that 4-year-old who loves Legos and is always building something is likely to be building their own house. And we need to think more like the pathfinders of 5 and 6 and 7 generations ago. Think more like the explorers. Think more like those who were hands-on. Think more like the, God forbid we use the word, settlers, right? We need to think more like this, because under universal suffrage, as long as we're on the teat, we are not independent, and we must work toward independence. We absolutely must, right? So the thoughts there are entrepreneurship, resource development, refining, manufacture, trade at a local level. At a local level. If you can manufacture something, then do it. If you can buy something local, but it costs you a little bit more, then see if you can't maybe find some form of barter or whatnot. I recommend you avoid using your children as, trade goods for bridal arrangements or whatnot, because I don't think we're at that point yet. But it may make an effort at a local level. So while I do preach a little bit of tax revolt, which is considered dangerous to say out loud these days, but if you want to turn off the tap in a big national manner, that's the mode. But if you want to control and ensure that when the water hits the river below, that you come out because your family is stable, because you have learned trade skills on which you do not rely on the government to give you, or to pay your hydro, or to put food on your table and clothes on your back. So we need to separate ourselves away from this toxic government, because Carney has made it very clear he's not interested in Canadians, and Poilievre has made it very clear that he's interested on keeping his job. Because if he goes to an election against Carney, he's going to lose, and he knows it.
Great comments, Tim. Thank you. I thought maybe we could head over to the questions. There's some really good questions from the audience, but before we do, if you guys could repost the live stream. Again, we're trying to get to 750, or in Mr. Milosha's terms, what was it, 78 billion viewers, something higher than we have right now.
78 billions, it will be a little bit difficult, unless we have bots.
77 billion? What's a good number?
Well,
all right, let's go with your friend, Andre, Mr. I don't know if it's Mr. Uncle Ray or Uncle Ray. Our payments for the interest on the debt is bigger than the defense budget. It's crazy. I believe it's also the same for the health budget. It's bigger than that. I saw a joke the other day. Somebody says, like, the world is whatever, $10 quadrillion in debt. Who do we owe the debt to? The Decepticons? If you think about it, like, who the hell do we owe the debt to? Some comedian said, why don't we just find that person and just kill them so we don't have to pay back the debt? Go ahead, Andre.
Well, he's right. And we think about the healthcare system. In Quebec, the healthcare system is costing $60 billion annually. With the type of service that we have, it is a disgrace because people are dying in the emergency room. We cannot see specialists. So he's right. It's crazy, but people, they get used to this type of discourse. They get used to it, and one day they consider it normal, which is not normal. Maybe what we're trying to do today is to say to people, you don't live. First of all, you don't live in a democracy, and it is not a normal situation. Maybe you start to distance yourself from the, let's say, the official narrative, and you start to think by yourself. Look at the way you behave, the way you act locally. Tim mentioned something. We always refer to localism, subsidiarity, meaning that the power has to come from the base. This is quite important. If you have a budget, do a budget. That's important. I've asked a lot of people in my life, do you do a budget? Most of them, they don't do a budget. You take an Excel file, it's quite easy. Passive, active, and passive and income. And then you do a small budget with all your income. And after that, you can play with it. You can say, oh, this year, this week, this month, I don't have enough money for groceries, so I'll borrow from one sector, but I can play with it. It's not difficult. Younger generation, they should be taught how to do a budget, a small budget. So how much do you make? How much money do you make? How much money do you spend? It's quite easy when you have free credit. There's no such thing as free credit, because free credit is somebody will ask you one day to pay back. I think the other comment is very interesting too.
Hold on. We'll get to them. Go ahead, Tim.
The interest paid on the debt is greater than, remember what I said, the interest paid on our debt is greater than our national federal healthcare budget. The interest paid on our federal debt is greater than our healthcare budget. I'm going to let that sink in for a while.
So 1 minute of silence. That's it.
Is that it, or is that?
That's it. That's it.
Okay,
That's it.
okay.
I want to get to questions too.
No, good point. The next one is from JT. Canada's provinces need to separate from the Westminster system and perhaps reunite as a republic, a new constitution that restrains the federal government better than they have attempted to in the USA. I agree with you in principle, and I would prefer going in that direction. But what I'm saying, and I'll see if my co-hosts agree with me, it's not the form of government that's the problem. It's the debt. It's the banks. It's the people that control all the money and the power, that no matter whatever politicians we vote in, these people are still in power. What do you think, Andre?
Well, we were there was a space yesterday on Canada Talk Tonight, and I was there talking about the project of constitution that we analyzed, I think 4 weeks ago. And the question was, can Quebec separate, or can Alberta separate? And I was invalidating the actual proposition of the Quebec government, because they were trying to avoid a catastrophe in the polls. In Alberta, the process is different. I think he's right for the separation, but separation, like you mentioned, Payment, to separate ourselves from the belief that we live in a fair system, then we can structure what we want instead of always reacting toward what we don't like. What we want. Tim mentioned, how to structure your life locally. Ask yourself what you want. Not necessarily barter, but can you do something? And can you do it without going to see a bank? Because the problem when you will go and see a bank to have a loan to start a business, there are conditions, and they will trap you in it, because you will need to show profit, you will need to show growth, you will need a business. I do agree with having a good business plan, but try to avoid those systems. And I think when GT is mentioning this, that's at least they are aware that we have to distance ourselves from the system, but also from the financial system. I think it's important.
Go ahead, Tim.
I'm going to make a prediction that so far in the future, no one will care when I'm wrong. So 15 years from now, Canada goes completely insolvent. But in that time, we've got a half a generation or so that have actually paid some attention. 15% of the population, 20 if we're super lucky, of people who said, you know what, localism, subsidiarity, we need to pay attention to this, and to bring things down back to a provincial level, regional, or even local, like here in the Fraser Valley, or regional being the Okanagan or like the Ontario River Valley region, et cetera, more regional in scope, so that what forests are there, what's under the ground, the rivers that are there, that we have to become reattached to our local geography and our local peoples and our local needs and what. So I think that as Canada completely collapses and whoever our new benefactor, our savior will be, tries to re-lasso the entire geography of Canada, realizes they can't, because like the fringes of Italy after Rome collapsed, everything fell back into named tribes, familial tribes, local regions. As Andre continues to say, kings were kings over people, not geography. Right? So we move into that. The idea of separating from the Westminster system becomes obsolete, because they will all be independent states. You'll have city states, but there'll be regions like the Fraser Valley or Vancouver, the Delta, or Victoria, or the Ottawa Valley, or the Montreal, right, et cetera, right, the Edmonton region. I predict that these will break into independently organized states of a sort. And I think that the bulk of Canada will fall into this, particularly along the larger metropolitan regions, which are Montreal, Toronto, down to the Windsor corridor, Edmonton, Calgary, and then Fraser Valley over to Vancouver Island. Those are where the major populations are. Those are the regions that are going to suffer more, because they're too reliant. Where are you going to go, right? So if your grocery store shuts down, your town will be in a riot in 3 days, less, right? So, well, yeah. So in the next 15 years, don't live in a metropolis. One, become self-reliant, right? Do what you can to regenerate and prepare your family, not for the Armageddon, but just to be more independent and more self-reliant in your familial circles. To go back to the way that was around 200 years ago, and find yourselves physically separated from a government that is not able to lasso all of you. But those who remain in the cities are going to be in trouble. And so that type of a union, like I said, reuniting as a republic, you would end up with some form of loose trade and political agreements between republics, regional sized republics, much more in the size of European states or European nations that are much more physically manageable, as opposed to Canada, which stretches across an entire continent. Right. So the thing that will undo Canada is the continent. It's too big. And the thing that will keep the spirit of Canadians alive will be this a agglomeration of independent republics in agreement and alliance with each other, except for communists, because communists aren't people.
Can get behind that. I don't know if the next commenter will agree with you, but People United, he's gone. He had an appointment, but he says socialism is the only way through this, the only way out of this end stage capitalism that we're seeing. The reason I bring this up is Mamdani just got elected as mayor, so he's the openly socialist mayor of New York, and I think the reason he got in, he gave an interview and he said, given the choice between people never being able to own a home and the state coming in and nationalizing all the land and giving land to the people, the choice is pretty simple. Now, I don't agree with the guy, but my point is socialism is providing a solution. It's not a good one. And I don't think it's tackling the main issues. Just like with unions, unions saw that the workers were being taken advantage of, and they came in and they gave a temporary solution. And now unions have been completely infiltrated by the same people that we're talking about. The solution to me is, I don't know how we do this, but basically dismantling and breaking up this oligarchy that we're talking about, not just bringing in socialism because our government sucks. Go ahead, Andre.
Well, this is funny because you mentioned the mayor of New York. So he's another ignorant about history. Socialism was tried many times. It doesn't work. So it's not because you try another time that it will work. Think about, you said something important. We have to destroy this system, or we have to deconstruct this system or disassemble. I don't like the word deconstruct, but disassemble the system. But we have to propose something else. And the Manichaean thinking of this mayor, if it's not capitalism, it will be socialism. What's the concept of capitalism? The capital, the wealth. That is something that is individual. We all need water. We all need food. We all need a house or a roof. That's the basic needs of a human being. Then you have the social part of a human being: relationship, trade, exchange, emotions. And this man is all. It's quite simple why he was elected. Because people are reacting toward a system that doesn't work, but they don't know for which reason it doesn't work. We tell the politicians, they tell them it doesn't work because of this. Is not true. This is not true. When you look at the financial system, when you look at how we treat elderly people or young generation, there was a comment. I think People United made a comment about Gen X does not see the value of a family. Of course, they don't see it because their parents were raised with a very low birth rate, and they benefit from a lot of improvement, innovation, and progress, which was good. But we forgot maybe the core value of human life: a family, love, the fact that we can be free of expressing our opinion. Those are values that were undermined in the last 50 years. I think socialism is not a way to end the stage capitalism. I think we will emerge in another system that will maybe borrow what could be the noble part of what is capitalism. Let's say, first of all, free of debt. In my quote earlier, when I mentioned the sovereign, the monarch, but the monarchy is bankrupt since the 17th century in England. They are financed by bankers. They are not sovereign. And if they're not sovereign, why we should be sovereign? Imagine the crown is not sovereign. The crown, the monarch of Great Britain is not sovereign. Okay, he has a lot of land. I think it is 11,000 acres of land that the crown owns. But you have to be able to maintain it. You need people to maintain it. You need people to retain a territory. Timson said something very important. The king does not rule over a territory. He rules over people. He has a responsibility and a duty toward his subject. And this is what the modern monarchy forgot. We can debate about what would be the best system, a republic or a monarchy. But in both ways, you have an oligarchy that says, okay, in United States, you have an American Constitution. Okay, that's great. But they violate the Constitution all the time. They have the uniparty in United States, like we have uniparty here. And they play a game because they are wealthy, very rich. Those people, they are multimillionaire. They are above the system. This is what people have to understand. They're above the system. They were always above the system. But let's say in the Middle Age, at least the king, they were born with the idea that they were representative of God, and they had to take care of their subject. They had duty. Today, the oligarchy doesn't have no duty at all. They're completely disconnected from the people. So why would we have a duty toward them if they don't have a duty toward us?
Go ahead, Tim.
I want to connect People Unite's comment on socialism and end stage capitalism with JT's question about opinions on direct democracy. I know that we enjoy the philosophical approach, and that we like discussing the various institutional forms that have been passed down to us over the centuries. But socialism is a tool they gave us. Capitalism is a tool they gave us. Democracy is that they gave us. What did they not give us? Family, tribalism, because that is innate, right? These other methods of institutionalizing or managing larger groups are constructs of men who, over many, many decades and centuries, have found reasonable models that put people together. And I've said in previously, any model of government will work as long as the people implementing it are honest, have integrity, and serve, that their leadership is through acts of service. The moment you have people who use, well, what Andre, your quote says it, we assigned our distaste for violence to a third party. That's what we do with capital punishment, right? We don't have an avenger of blood anymore. We don't have the next of kin anymore. That when someone egregious my family, that a member of my family has the right to go after and to gain recompense. We have assigned that to a governing body. And in so we have lost our taste for hard labor. We have lost our taste for doing it the way we need to do it. And we've accepted socialism or capitalism or democracy or et cetera, different models of government that still offload our responsibility onto a third party. And that third party lacks, evidently, some point in time, loses integrity or buys it off or whatnot. So direct democracy has shown up a lot in conversations since 2015-ish, more so since the COVID nonsense, right? Direct democracy is really only possible in a highly industrialized system that relies on instant communication. So if you're going to do a referendum, you have to say on such and such a date, be at your computer to push these buttons and read this on the referendum. And while we have that today, that technology, we don't have a governing body or a technocratic body that will do this with any form of integrity. So we have to reduce it and reduce it and reduce it and reduce it, which is why I continue to go back to tribalism and family. And the negative aspect of tribalism is ghettoization, but that's inevitable. That's inevitable. So if it's inevitable, then how do we manage to have ghettos alongside ghettos that aren't always fighting with it? What was it? The McCoys? I see. It was going to be funny, and then I lost it because I screwed it up. Right? But we need to find ways to do that. So on a local level, right? So you have families that find ways to work together, neighborhoods that find ways to work together, and we intentionally keep it nucleus, intentionally keep it small. The reason why things get bigger is because someone says, I can manage this collective. I can collectivize. I can take, and we expand and we expand and we expand. And before you know it, you've got an empire. And we all know that the empires do not work. Empires do not work. Democracy only works insofar as you have people of integrity who are managing the system. And that's the same for any form of government. The same, and we have seen in our lifetime that our government is actively, aggressively, and intentionally willfully using our own model of our own institutions against us. And the sole purpose is to destroy it. That's it. So we can't choose direct democracy because that's not going to be an option. We can't choose socialism because Marxism demands that socialism itself be revolted against. Marxism is endless revolution. Capitalism, as we've been taught, is actually free trade. Capitalism, as it's been acted out, is a form of abuse, because those with the gold make all the rules, right? So you have these left hand, right hand operations in our institutions that are preventing integrity from trickling down to the people. Meanwhile, the people continue to fund it through their taxes and their labor. Right? The solution is tribalism. That's probably going to be what I preach from here on out.
Andre, the question that Tim was referring to was from JT. What are your gentlemen's opinions on direct democracy? I'll let you speak to that as well, but I'm also going to bring up a comment by Uncle Ray. Canada needs to do a 1776 moment. Direct democracy, I just call it absolute democracy. I don't think it's, I mean, if you have stupid people, it doesn't matter. They're still going to do stupid things. The 1776 moment, Uncle Ray, I think we're witnessing it right now. I mentioned how in the last 24 hours, so many people have been talking about the debt. People like the three of us, we've sacrificed the last 5-6 years of our life in understanding what's going on. Mr. Maloche is the older of us three, and he's been not to age you, but he's been intimately following philosophy. We brought a guest on, Mr. Charles Fichtner, and Mr. Charles Fichtner educated him in why it is that Canadians are the way that they are. So I think we're witnessing our 1776 moment. I don't know if it's slightly too late. Go ahead, Andre.
Well, we were referring to, that's a very good comment, payment about the education provided by Charles Fichtner, because we're never too old to learn something. Canada do need a 1776 moment, but like you said, we need educated and cultured people. That's the first thing. The second thing, toward direct democracy, universal suffrage, everybody has the right to vote. In a small democracy like ancient Greek, only a small group of people could vote. And if you expand, one day it becomes bureaucracy or an empire. Think about, Tim mentioned it about the Roman Empire. The more they were conquering territory, the more the center was corrupted. And suddenly the donut collapse inside. Direct democracy. There's a French intellectual, Etienne Chouard, who's talking about drawing people. You draw a name out of a hat and you say, okay, you are elected, randomly. That's interesting too, because I draw Payman Askari and you will be the MP. You didn't want to be there, but the system will ask you to become an MP, and you say, I don't have the qualification. The suits will help you achieve the position. We see some people who were not meant to be in politics, and suddenly they're a good politician. Why? Because they take the position seriously. Their duty, their responsibility. Tim mentioned something very important. The institution and all those concepts, political or philosophical concepts, are very good. Separation of power, the three type of power, the two elected chamber, the parliament and the senator. Those are very, very old concepts. And they work well if you have people who understand what they're doing. You can imagine I draw your name from a hat, and you're not meant to do this, but we pay you a good salary and you learn. So it means that it is possible to educate people. But people, they also have to understand that they have a duty to make an effort to be educated. When you stop making an effort, when you start to grow slowly your education, you decay. Mainstream media have put people in a passive mode. We feed them. We feed them with news. We feed them with concepts, with behavior, and we tell them to react in a way. Get out of your chair, move, do something that is creative, especially locally. If you meet people, why? I think there was a comment from the one listener who was saying the confinement were made to separate us, to break the family, break the community, and it worked. We have to reverse the tide, and I think it is possible. But we will need to inspire young generation. They will inherit this world. Lockdown was all about no community, no family. We have to inspire them. We have to be able to talk to them, to give them the wisdom that we have accumulated. And after that, let them do their own mistakes, but let them also live. Don't put them in confinement and lockdown. That's what they did with during 2 3 years to children. It was horrible. We will pay the price psychologically, and I pray that we will be able to get out of this actual straitjacket.
Tim, you can speak to the direct democracy or the 1776 moment.
1776 existed because it happened along 13 colonies that were all very close to each other geographically. It was a small, concentrated, dense population of educated and well-aligned people, and Canada doesn't have that. Not that we don't have well-educated and well-aligned people, because we do, for the most part, but what we don't have is a concentration, because we're stretched across a 5,000-mile horizontal line, right? I'll say once again, Montreal, Toronto corridor down the Windsor, and then once you're basically once you get east of Windsor, it's central Canada all the way over to Calgary and Edmonton, and then you got to get all the way across the mountains, right? The biggest, widest the range on the entire planet, widest, right? And then you got to go down into the valley, which is where I am, and then over Vancouver and Victoria. You have 4 separate high concentration centers in the entire country. Every single one of them is different, culturally different, economically different, resource-based different. Everything is different. Everything is different. So 1776 is not possible in Canada. You know what is possible is Oka.
Well, if you say Oka, you mean
yes, I mean
in well,
yeah.
Insurrection. It will happen. It's not a question of when or if it will happen, or it will happen. The real question is when, because when people will face despair, they will just do it. This will be a natural outcome. It is not. It's not me who's saying it. Just look at the history. We can look at what happened in Romania after the end of the Soviet Union. What happened to Nicolae Ceausescu? How they got rid of him, because they were angry because the system was collapsing and betraying them. They reacted. Do you think it will be different here? The 1776 moment, and this in her book on revolution, Anna Arendt, she's showing that the 1776 moment was not really a revolution, exactly because what you said, Tim. People were educated, cultivated, they were organized, and they knew what to do. And the structure, they were distancing themselves from the British crown, but they were educated men, entrepreneur, and they were intelligent enough not to destroy everything, to rebuild, and they were succeeding. And irony, she makes a very big difference between the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and the American Revolution. I think it's important. The 1776 moment, I hope we will have intelligent people enough in Canada, I think we do, to get up and to create something. If it is a republic, why not? But let's write the text. Let's work on. Let's disagree. Let's disagree on things. We have to do this.
If there is a 1776 like moment, or a Boston Tea Party ish, that's, I think, something more realistic for comparison moment. then you will find something similar to what's eventually going to happen in Richmond, that section of land regarding the Cowichan tribal land claims. There is going, I shouldn't say is going to be, there is going to be, I'm going to say it anyway, somebody who's been paying on his home for the last 40, 30, 20 years. He's been paying his property tax faithfully. He's been maintaining his property faithfully. He's been paying his mortgage faithfully, maybe not making a really great income. So he's remortgaged, right? Right. So, and he's been doing it, and all under the belief that he owned it. He's now a grandfather, right? And him and his wife, it's all the typical Canadian, right? Urban family for 40 years. And some lunatic judge folds over and bends for woke garbage, which is a mandate given to him from on high, which is connected to the Liberal Party and whoever's above the UN, etc., that says, do not judge in favor of the citizen. Fee simple is a thing of the past. We want conflict. And that one man or some other man or some woman, a homeowner, is going to pop. It might not be Richmond. It could be West Quebec. Are they having a similar problem now? Right? So it is moments like that that are going to give you your Boston Tea Party moment, but not a 1776 moment. I'll give you a perfect example. 2 days ago, they killed the rest of the ostriches. What else do you need to know? What else do you need to know?
I agree with you for the Richmond land thing. It activated and it woke up. It did the impossible. I thought Canadians would never wake up. Like, I'll just leave it there. But my concern is this government that we're dealing with is a ruthless, evil, cunning government that's going to look at that and say, all right, we went a little too far. Let's call that 100%. Let's stick to stealing their assets 70%, maybe 80, but let's not come up to that threshold. That's my concern, and Canadians will go back to sleep.
There's something we always say: Canadian are kind, Canadian are peaceful people. We remember Diffin Baker and the Peacekeeper in Canada. We had this romantic view of Canadian people that were peaceful and kind people. This is a concern what you're mentioning, because if they just take a step back, we could also say, okay, that's okay. Let's not forget 2020 with the COVID mandate. 75% of the population, according to the statistics, took the shot, and now we understand what is happening, and they cannot accept that they were betrayed. So they will just want to forget what happened. And yes, it is possible that they would go back to sleep. But let's not. One thing, I go back again to the monopoly of credit, or the monopoly of the financial system. There's an end to this. There's not an end to the wealth of Canada, for example, because Canada in resources and knowledge, it's very rich. But the end will be the end of this monopoly. And when people will decide to change this, they will take the power in their own hands. They will not wait. Forget about AI, forget about drone and everything. This, yes, it could be a bloodshed. I remember I met, what was his name? He was from American Free Press in August, and he said, if you think that the revolution will be bloodless, think again. It will be bloody, but in a sense that you cannot have a tyrann in front of you and not oppose directly. This is what will happen. I'm not predicting it. It's the law of nature. When people will be deprived of everything, they will just rise. It will take time, and the rise will come from the younger generation, even if they are indoctrinated by universities and college, because now they're reacting to wokeism, the idea. The younger generation who will uh, embrace what we would call socialism will be hit directly with the consequences of this system, and they will not wait 10 years to react. The younger generation, they don't have patience. That comes with time, with maturity. When you're 20 years old, you act and you think after. When you're 65 or 55 or 60, you think, and sometimes it takes time to act because it's a little bit more long. But I think those young generation will not wait. We let's us older people inspire them, tell them it's not a question of not acting. Think what you want in life, and I think it's we have a long journey in front of us, each and every one of us. So let's prepare ourselves.
Do you want to, Tim, make some final statements? And we've
I
gone
do.
a little over, and then we'll wrap
I
it up.
do. Yep. We've often talked about those victims of lawfare and criminal charges and stuff for the last 5 years or so. And we say that these are the men and women who've thrown themselves on the barbed wire, and that in order that their mates can go right use their body as a living bridge. Horrible, ugly thing, but right, so that they can take the territory beyond and win the victory. And by and large, we've abandoned these people. They become a flash in the pan for 3 or 4 months, and then they just kind of fall off the wayside. With today's budget coming out, it becomes, and I've been politically involved for 6 years now, and it becomes more and more clear to me that Gen X is the generation to throw itself on the barbed wire. We have the education, we have the knowledge, we have the experience, and and we have the, well, I have no more fucks to give. Right? So that could be us. We could throw ourselves on the barbed wire. And by that, I'm not necessarily meaning going out and doing the protest thing and getting chained up and getting all right, but by putting ourselves out as the distraction so that their children, like you said, they're going to make quick decisions. They're not going to wait around and think about it. They're going to go, yeah, but I can't buy my coffee right now. And that motivation means that they will act quickly, and they can come over us. Right? And I know I'm being very metaphorical, and it's not always very useful to do that because we want to be solution oriented. But if the work that I do in other circles that I don't talk about on this show, if the work that I do in other circles encourages my children to say, you know what, I can do something about that, then the millennials will actually save us. The Gen Z and whatever, they will actually save us, because we push down the big obstacles because we know how. Right? So I'm encouraged. Right? So we have to go into these, and social media is obviously a major vehicle for us to do that. But there are other things that we can do politically, in our unions, in our schools, in our municipalities, in our et cetera, where we see somebody acting out and being an ass. We say, listen, and we do it publicly. We shame them publicly. The reason why people are getting away with being a dick in the shopping line at the grocery store is because no one says, hey, ass, shut the fuck up. Right? So we need to start being that people that say, this is the line. This is the line. You're in the grocery store and you cross a line. We don't accept this. Right? We call out egregious behavior because abusers are getting away with it. Now I'm coughing. And in so doing, our children are encouraged because they know that we're actually protecting. We're actually fighting, and we're actually standing on the line. And I believe that day is here. And I'm very encouraged when you mention that our children are quick to act, and they are energetic, and they are motivated. And I have a lot of faith in our children, much more so than I did 10 years ago. But that's because I had my head stuck in my ass like most conservatives. So happy Remembrance Day.
Thank you, Tim. Happy Remembrance Day. It may look like we don't have poppies, but Andre had a background wallpaper. I had a poppy on this. The phone has died. I wanted to thank everyone in the audience. If you guys could, there you go, Andre. If you could, even though we're at the end of the episode, if you could repost the stream, if you could share it, we really want to get this message out because this was a very important episode. We're trying to inform and educate Canada on the serious issue, which is our debt. So we would very much appreciate that. Thank you very much to my two co-hosts, and we'll see everyone next week.